So we are jumping into the new Western Empire. So my question is, if this is the new Western Empire, what would we call the old Western Empire? Raise your hand if you think you know. What is the old Western Empire, Haley? Rome, good. So Rome is the old Western Empire. Rome has fallen. At this time, what is going on in the east? Raise your hand again if you think you know. What is going on the east side while we are talking here about west? Haley already knows something here. We don't need to know what else she knows right now. So somebody else jump in to the conversation. Join us, please. What's going on the eastern side of the old Roman Empire? What'd you say? Yeah, Byzantium. All right, the Byzantine Empire, Justinian. We've talked about them already, so we're going to focus here on the western side and see how the western part of Rome is living and eventually how they're going to jump back into society. So we begin here with Clovis. And a couple of things that you should know about the Western Empire, especially here in the this section of Rome. Clovis and the Franks live in a time where villages are very scattered. You don't have tight-knit communities. You've got little packs of people over in this section, and then you go a few more miles, you've got little groups of people over here, and then you go a few more miles, you've got other groups of people over here. Life expectancy was very short. And because life was focused primarily upon survival, people did not travel very far. They stayed within their small communities. They stayed to themselves. A lot of the landscape is dominated by forests. Chance, would you close that door so we can eliminate some of that hallway noise? Thank you. So you have all these massive trees around. People are hiding out in the forest. A lot of old fairy tales actually come out of this time period. Yeah. Some of those, well, they may not have been written during this time, but they're set in this type of theme. So the Franks have the largest empire since Rome in the Western Empire. And so Clovis is the guy who comes in and he conquers most of Gaul, and he unites these small pockets of people together under a strong leadership. So let's get our minds focused here. Where is Gaul? We've heard about this in Rome, under Julius Caesar. Modern-day Gaul is where? France. There we go. Okay, so what we think of as France. So a little perspective here up on the map. Here is Gaul. Here's Italy. And so we're not too far from there. And again, remember that this is where Julius Caesar gained some of his momentum and his popularity. Read a story over the weekend about one of the ways that Julius Caesar gained his popularity. He was fighting over here in Gaul, and he had surrounded a city and laid them under siege. And he had built up this massive barricade around the city. There's no way in, no way out, unless they went through Julius Caesar and his Roman Empire. Well, as he was waiting out the city, waiting to conquer them, waiting for them to give up, another larger group of people came to attack Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar's spies heard that they were coming, and so they built up another outer ring outside of the Roman legion, and so they essentially sandwiched themselves in between two massive walls. All right? You guys get the picture? Mm-hmm. So they've got on this side the city that they are trying to conquer. They built up another wall over here to protect themselves from an invading group of people, and they're stuck in the middle like an Oreo. Okay? Somehow, and I'm not sure exactly how, but somehow Julius Caesar ended up becoming victorious. He split his army and he fought both sides, and they defeated both groups at the same time. But he had closed himself off in these inner walls here in Gaul. Yeah, pretty amazing tactical move here by Julius Caesar. But, yeah, kind of like a monkey in the middle. Good way of putting that. I'll have to remember that one.
Here we go. Clovis here conquers most of Gaul, and he becomes king of the Franks. This is one of the first kings that we see in the new Western Empire. And while he is king of the Franks, he converts to Christianity. And this is one of those quick prayers like, okay, Lord, if you're there and you can hear me and you help me win this battle, I'll be a Christian forever and ever, amen. And I'm not even kidding about that prayer. It was very similar to that, and that's why you see the quotation marks around it. Okay, he converts to Christianity. Yeah, sort of, kind of. And for war purposes, yeah. Now, Christianity, we should associate with which organization during this time? Catholic Church, okay? So he makes an alliance. Help me define that term alliance. What does that mean? Partnership or friendship with the Catholic Church between the Franks, okay, modern day France, Western Europe, and the Catholic Church. And this alliance is going to last for the next several hundred years. So most of the people that are living here in France and some of Germany, they would have been Catholic because of Clovis's influence here. Next several hundred years. Yep. And this is part of why Western Europe becomes dominated by the Catholic Church, was because of Clovis and his conversion to Christianity. Hold on, I forgot my air quotes. Conversion to Christianity. And now he insists that all of his people become Roman Catholic, and so Catholic Church began to be built in France and in Germany, and it continues to expand. The Pope is around, yes.
So if Clovis as king goes against the beliefs of the Catholic Church, does he have to pay that price?
We're going to talk about that here in a little while because, yes, they're going to. They're going to turn against each other, and things don't get pretty. Now, this next topic is about mayors of the palace. So Clovis established a royal family line. This was not an easy thing to do. It's something that we take for granted today. In our minds, we think, well, if there's a king, automatically who should take over after him when he dies? His son or his next relative. If he doesn't have sons, it's going to be his next oldest relative. That's just an automatic thing in our mind. That was not the case in these days. In these days, when the king died, it was, okay, who's the most powerful person that's going to take over for him? It doesn't matter if he's related or not. Whoever has the most powerful army, whoever has the most influence, that person's probably going to take over. Well, Clovis didn't like that idea. He wanted his sons to reign. And so he established a family rule, a royal family line, and it's now known as the Merovingian house. And this is his, kind of think of it like a last name, Clovis Merovingian, maybe. And so therefore he said, my son is going to take over after me, and if you don't like it, you're going to die.
Okay.
And he had enough loyalty among his military that he could enforce it. And then his son took over, and as his sons end up taking over the kingdom, they try to rule the same way his father did. But what have we learned from history? It never works out when you divide the kingdom among your sons. So, his sons gain I think it's a fourth. I don't have it in my notes as far as how many sons they have. But he divides the kingdom up among his sons, and they waste away his kingdom. They're very disorganized. There's a lot of drunkenness, a lot of immorality. They are loving the palace life. They're loving the fact that their dad did so much work so they could just spend it all and waste it all away on parties. So these guys became known as do-nothing kings. I think rightly nicknamed. Because they reigned, they were technically the king, but they literally did nothing. They did not.
Someone come and take them out?
Well, they still had enough power and influence from their father that nobody else was able to gain enough momentum to be able to take them out. when we, near the end of the chapter, we're going to talk about the condition of the common people. Most of the common people are in such poor condition that they're not going to be able to muster an army to be able to revolt anyway. Oh, the soldiers? Yeah. So they were given a comfortable enough life that if they would have revolted, they might have messed everything up. So life was pretty decent. I mean, you had food, you had enough supplies to get by, as long as you remain loyal to the throne. So these guys reigned but did not rule. So they appointed somebody by the name with the title Mayor of the Palace. And this person was in charge of running the day-to-day operations of the government. So the mayor of the palace would be like the chief of staff in the White House, organizing all of the king's events, making decisions when the king wasn't available to make those decisions. Kind of like a secretary, yeah. That's how it began. And so the mayor of the palace, he was in charge of the king's schedule. He was in charge of putting everything, lining it all up for the king. Well, the king just kind of decided, you know what, Mr. Mayor, just go ahead and do it. You know, sign my name. You guys know what it looks like. Use my seal. Here, let me give it to you. They give him the seal, and the mayor of the palace ended up signing the bills, signing the laws, and making the decisions. And eventually, the mayor of the palace was the one making all the decisions, essentially working as the king. It was a gradual takeover of power, but he was still doing it under the king's name. And the king... What?
Starts messing stuff up and everyone blames the king.
Well, he could have. To my knowledge, that did not happen. So this goes on for quite some time. All right, this is not just like it happened for a year. It happened for many years put together, till eventually we have a man by the name of Pepin II.
Pepin is dead.
I've heard of him.
You have. What do you know about him?
I have no idea. I don't remember. I just remember the name because it sounds
Okay.
funny.
Yeah,
It sounds like a bird. I can't remember the bird.
A puffin.
Yeah.
there you go.
They look like penguins.
So
Yeah.
Pepin II, his claim to fame here is that he brought together the territories that had once been united under Clovis. And he was able to regain all that power and regain all of the loyalty of the subjects and all the people there. And he brought them back together, reuniting most of those territories that had once been under Clovis's rule. And then we have his son, and his son's name was Charles Martel. And by the way, Pepin II was a mayor of the palace. Okay, Charles Martel is also going to be a mayor of the palace. He's not king, but these guys are essentially working as kings. They're doing all the dirty work while the kings are off having their lavish parties and enjoying the good life. Michelle, was that your question?
I was gonna actually go back.
Go back. Pepin II reunited the Frankish territories. Yep. So here we get to Charles Martel. He's the son of Pepin II, and there was a problem that we mentioned in the video the other day regarding the Muslims. Where were the Muslims spreading?
Everywhere.
Okay, they were spreading everywhere but Rome. So they were coming, if we look at our map here, Muslims were coming across the northern part of Africa. They were moving up into Spain, and now they're coming from Spain and they're starting to move here into France. Well, what religious organization is France united with? Catholic. Is that a problem? Yes, big time. Because we have a fast-growing group of Muslims now trying to invade France, who is predominantly Catholic, and it leads to an all-out war. Charles Martel, in the year 732, He stops the advance of the Muslims into the Frankish territories. He meets them near the Pyrenees Mountains, which separates France and Spain, and they have this battle. And it is the Battle of Tours. And this may be one of the most unknown but significant battles in all of history. Anybody want to take a guess as to why this battle was significant?
Where did you say it was?
It was right on the border between France and Spain, and it was between Charles Martel and the Muslims.
Was this the crusade?
No, it's not the Crusades yet.
Would it be because if I don't know who won, but I'm guessing probably not.
Very good.
But
Why?
if they
Okay.
were to have won, they would have taken over that whole area of
Okay, you're right on it. So, the Muslims lose. Charles Martel is victorious. So, if it would have gone the other way, as Julie said there, and if the Muslims would have won, what are the repercussions? What would have changed in Europe? It would have been all Muslim. Culture would have changed.
It would have changed really everything.
We would probably be.
Everything in history would be different, wouldn't it?
It would probably be Islam and Luther.
Yeah, no Martin Luther.
Possibly would have been
Because from the Catholic Church came our ancestors over to America because they wanted to get away from the Catholic Church. So if there was no Catholic Church, we might not even be here.
It's an interesting thought here because this is a huge turning point in history, but yet it's rarely ever talked about. Okay, so
Why isn't it talked about?
we look
That's
at
dumb.
we look at the providence of God in what God had planned for us here in 2017, and we look back all the way in 732, almost 1,000 years ago. That event shaped the way that we are today and dramatically altered history. And it's incredible to think about what might have happened had this battle gone the other way. So Charles Martel steps up and he defeats the Muslims, the Battle of Tours. While he's there, he earns the nickname, perhaps one of the greatest nicknames in all of history. He's called the Hammer. I mean, I don't know you can do much better than that, other than maybe The Rock. I mean,
Rock.
yeah.
Yes.
So, regardless of whether you like his acting skills or not, those are two incredible nicknames. You got to admit that. Yeah.
Welcome.
You all right, Aaron? Okay. I could see his eyes were open, but he just looked a little spaced out. So, Charles Martel, he earns an incredible victory and really against all odds because the Muslims were much more unified and they probably should have won this battle. But again, I think we have to look at God's providence in all of this and giving credit here to God allowing for Charles Martel and the Franks to be able to defeat the Muslims. And so the Muslims are forced to stay in Spain, and we're going to come back. We'll talk about them again in the future when we talk about Spain. But for right now, we're going to have them park in Spain, and they'll just hang out there for a while. Well, then we have the son of Charles Martel. His name was Pepin the Short. And he is also going to serve as mayor of the palace. And he starts to look around at the world around him, and he realizes that all of these mayors of the palace, they're the ones doing all the work. And so he decides he's going to go to the Pope, and he's going to ask the Pope if the Pope would appoint him as the king. Now, why would he do this? Somebody give me some thoughts here. Why in the world would the mayor of the palace, second guy in command, go to the Pope, ask him for a promotion? James, what do you think?
He's already running the country.
Okay, he's already running the country. What else do you think? Haley?
The alliance with the church, and the Pope having all the rule with the Catholic belief.
Good.
He would be in charge of the king too.
Good. Very good. Rebecca?
Like, he wants recognition for what he's already doing, and this is the easiest way to do it because there would be no war.
Okay.
The only person that is going to ignore the Pope would be the king himself, and that's only because the Pope is going against him.
Okay. Very good. So I think all of you have contributed to getting to the answer here and helping us to understand the relationship between the Pope and the people, and how here, Pepin the Short needed a moderator in the middle to be able to make this decision for them. Julie?
How could he overrule the king? Is it just because the people would?
Yeah, so that comes to a really good question. So, how does the Pope have the power over a political king? How is he able to make that decision and make it work? Haley?
Because their Catholic beliefs, the Pope being the superior under Christ, under God.
Okay, so if they truly believe that the Pope is directly from God, then the Pope can say, I've communicated to God on this, and yeah, like Samuel anointed, great illustration. So the Pope then is going to reply, and he's going to say, okay, the one who holds the power should be king, or the one who executes the power should be king. So what that meant was that the mayor of the palace, specifically in this case it was Pepin the Short, was going to become the next king. And so in 751, he established the Carolingian house, named after Charlemagne. No, we're going to get to Charlemagne here next. Yeah, he's not quite there yet. We named this after the fact. This is not something that they established and they announced we have the Carolingian house now. This is something historians have gone back and named after Charlemagne. But Pepin the Short begins a line of kings that is going to lead to Charlemagne taking over, and he's pretty significant, as you'll see here momentarily. So, did the Pope just do this out of the kindness and goodness of his heart?
No.
No. What do you think?
Then he
Money.
had, then the guy owed him for getting him in that
Okay,
spot.
that's exactly what the Pope is thinking, is that, you know what, I did something to help you out there, Pepin. What are you going to do in return for me? And it's a very much a give and take, and they work together in all of this. And there's been a lot of criticism, questioning, okay, did they have this all planned out in the beginning, and was this a whole conspiracy just to get the Pope what he wanted? Perhaps. So, the Pope had an issue back home. Where does the Pope live? Julie? Lives in Rome. Okay, what's your question?
Is the Pope like one person? I'm so
Yes.
confused. Is it like one person?
Yes.
Or it's-
Pope is one person. At this point, it was once a group of patriarchs, and the patriarch from Rome grew up, kind of became the most powerful, and named himself Pope after protecting from outside invaders. So now it is one person. We've not talked about very many popes by themselves yet. We are going to talk about some here soon. But yes, it's one person. He's in charge of the Catholic Church. Now, he had a problem. He lived in Rome, and that is the center area of the Catholic Church. But they were under attack from a group of people called the Lombards. The Lombards wanted to come in. They wanted to conquer Rome. They wanted to take over the Catholic Church. They wanted to destroy, pillage, plunder, whatever they could do. And obviously the Pope did not think that was a great idea. So he asks for Pepin's help. And Pepin says, well, yeah, sure. I mean, you just made me king. We're friends. So yeah, I'll come. I'll bring my soldiers, and we'll get rid of those dirty, nasty Lombards. And we're going to help you out. And so Pepin comes in fairly easily. He conquers the Lombards, pushes them out of Rome, so they're no longer a threat. And he takes over the land that they had conquered, which you can see here. I realize that is separated by the Great Divide. But you can see this area outlined in red in Rome. That this was the area that the Lombards had started to control. Well, now that Pepin conquered it, who owns it? Pepin owns it. But he is going to turn it over to the Pope. And when he gives it to the Pope, it is known as the donation of Pepin. Yeah, go ahead and flip forward. Yep. So this donation of Pepin was directly in response to the Pope helping Pepin become king. And now this today is known as the Papal States. And this is how the Catholic Church came to have this territory as an independent, sovereign, political nation. this making sense? Okay.
So it's separate from.
Okay, so Pepin takes the land that he conquered from the Lombards and he donates it to the Catholic Church. And so the Catholic Church now has total control over it. Does that make sense? Okay. And the Catholic Church still maintains control over most of this territory. It's called the Vatican City, the Papal States. Very
Yeah,
good.
so what happened there? We got all that land, and now it's like, now you're just like, the Vatican City.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So technically, this area, which it's not this big anymore.
Right, like what happened to it?
Well, the Catholic Church still controls it. Yeah. So if you go to Rome, there is an element, or there's a border inside of Rome that belongs to the Vatican City that is not governed by Italy or Rome. It is
Like in current day.
right in current day.
What?
Yeah, they're their own independent land inside.
Yeah, I get that. But Vatican City is like that city there. But there's on the map it also says everything else is just Italy.
Right.
Except for
It's so tiny. That's why I say it's not this big anymore. It's so tiny that on most maps it doesn't actually show up as an independent state. Does that make sense?
So you're saying the land that they control strong?
Yeah.
So around the city.
Right.
And all that? Okay, but that's what I'm asking. What happened?
Oh, so okay, I see what you're saying now. So the Catholic Church slowly started to give away or sell off some of this to Rome, and so I don't have the exact answers,
More money.
but yeah, they did end up giving that away to some point.
Yeah. Good question, though.
I remember Vatican City.
You do. Awesome. Here we go. Something stuck from last year. So proud. Little tear forming in my eye.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm not very good at geography.
Can we go back to geography? No.
I never learned geography.
No.
Do you
I
jump?
Yeah.
lost the heck out, man. I would have failed that class. What did you learn? Nothing. I